What's good, super friends? It's your Tío Pepe representing the West Side, Sunland Park, 575, here to tell you about our Patreon. Let's go, cruising down the I-10, podcast be bumping, TAC on the mic, the homeboys be nuttin', knowledge bombs be dropping like with Stephen Hawking, and the laughs keep coming like with Jimmy Fallon, but you wanna be a homie, VIP, MVP, take the first toke, but it's only $2 so you don't choke, episodes be ad-free, a week early, gluten-free, and of course, no MSGs, hook you up each show with the weekly shout-out, send you stickers to flex in the Walmart checkout, Patreon.com/technically a conversation. Cheaper than cigarettes at the gasoline station. Patreon.com/technically a conversation. Link in the show notes. Thank you for your donation. In 2013, 200 bottles of Pappy Van Winkle bourbon went missing from the Buffalo Trace distillery, making international news. Each bottle often fetches over $4,000 on the secondary market, making it one of the most expensive and sought-after whiskeys in the world. While Toby Curtsinger was convicted of the crime, none of the bottles were ever recovered, and the evidence seems to suggest that he might not have been responsible. Today, we'll go over the case and key points of the investigation, the alcohol theft and drug ring Curtsinger was a part of, and who might have been responsible for the great Pappy Van Winkle Bourbon Heist of 2013 on this episode of Technically a Conversation. Greetings, you're listening to Technically a Conversation, a podcast where we share an interesting topic or story with each other and hope you find it interesting as well. I'm one half of your host, Jose, and I'm joined today by my lovely co-host, Elena. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm doing good also. So in the last episode, you let us know that dry 30 didn't go too well for you. How about Whole Foods 30 or whatever?
Towards the end, I started not really following it as much. I try to be as clean as I could, but sometimes I was just too lazy to cook, and it happens. It was either that or not eat at all, so whatever.
Yeah, it's tough. I know how it is sometimes, and I find myself cooking a lot less than I wish that I did.
Yeah, other years I've done great. It was just this year, I don't know, for whatever reason, I couldn't finish it, but I'll try again some other time during the year.
What made you break first? The lack of alcohol or the lack of preservatives in your food?
Normally, the lack of alcohol doesn't bother me, but this year it did. And I think it was just like some stressful days at work that I was just kind of like, you know what? I just deserve it. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, sometimes you do have to treat yourself.
Well, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, it makes the days like worth it sometimes. It's like, okay, I had a shitty day, but now I get to reward myself.
Right? I couldn't find other ways of rewarding myself except for with booze. So, oh well.
I reward myself whether I deserve it or not.
Don't we all?
All right, so this is going to be kind of a long episode. So enough fucking around, Elena. Ready to get started?
I am. Let's get started.
Great. Let's get started.
That's what I just said.
Hey, you already know what my spiel is. You're copying me, girl.
All right. Touche.
All right. Well, since we are talking about alcohol, have you ever drank whiskey before?
Yes.
What's your favorite brand, or do you have a favorite brand?
Crown Royal, is that considered a whiskey? Scotch whiskey, right?
No, that's a Canadian whiskey.
Was it a whiskey?
It is a whiskey. And Scotch is a whiskey too.
I would say just because I can't think of another brand or name, I'm going to go with that one.
That's a good whiskey. That was my gateway drug into whiskey, I would say.
Right.
I don't know if you know this. I know I've shared it with your husband, Antonio, but I pretty much stopped drinking beer because it was causing my gout to flare up like a pack of hemorrhoids. I'll still drink if I'm at a party or a get-together or when I visit my dad on Wednesdays. But at home, I pretty much drink whiskey, and I haven't had a gout attack since I switched. So, I don't know, it's just anecdotal, but I guess it worked. Or at least it worked for me.
Yeah, some correlation between the beer and the gout attacks. Wow, I didn't know that. I mean, I've noticed that you've been drinking the whiskey a lot more and bringing them over, like bringing it over to our dad's, but I didn't know because of the increase of gout attacks.
Yeah, I was starting to get gout a lot. And then I Googled to see if whiskey was better. And it said, well, really, no alcohol is good for gout. But if you insist on drinking, whiskey is better than beer. So I was like, sold.
Awesome. What about the cherry pills?
Oh, and I stopped taking those like in the 90s or whatever.
You should have reintroduced them, no?
I'll have to research that more. Like now that there's been more time and probably more research done to see if they were actually doing anything or if it was just a placebo or old wives' tale or something.
All right.
Now, as you probably know, whiskey can get really expensive. So that brings out the nerd in me and makes me research to try and find some of the best value bourbons I can come across. I even started a little whiskey club with a couple of friends where you get together once a month. We each bring a bottle, taste them, talk about them. So shout out to Angel and Bryant. Bryant and another buddy, Mikey, both told me that they've recently started listening to our show and they both said that they really enjoy it. So thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, don't forget we also have a Patreon. No, I'm just kidding. You can contribute to your whiskey and to the Patreon.
Wachala. She's like from the school of the boiler room. Always be closing, girl. What are your ABCs? Always be closing.
Okay, so you guys meet up virtually or?
Virtually.
They're local?
Yeah, they're local.
Oh, okay, cool.
Bryant, even though he lives on Horizon now, he's actually from Sunland Park, representing
505, 575, or whatever you guys are now.
575, baby, representing. So, and he's really enjoying our show. Like he'll be telling me, oh shit, I just heard your episode on this. And then like he'll talk about some of the stuff. So I'm glad that he's enjoying it.
Oh, I'm glad too. Nice. Welcome.
And I said, welcome to the show. So while talking about whiskeys, specifically bourbons, which is my favorite, is a lot of fun, that wouldn't make for a very compelling episode of Technically a Conversation. That's not what our super fans have come to expect from us. So if I'm bringing it up, it's because there's some fuckery involved. And is there ever fuckery in this story?
I always love me some fuckery.
You get your month's worth of fuckery in this episode.
It's a good thing the month's almost over. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, when this comes out, I think it'll be like the second week of February. So
See.
You get to start off February right. The following is from a Thrillist article by James Higdon, a Men's Journal article by Reeves Weedman, an Esquire article by Lawrence Crank, a Screen Rant article by Matt Morrison, and a News Politics Bourbon article by Brad Bowman. Link in the show notes. Pappy Van Winkle is considered the Cadillac of bourbons.
Pappy Van Winkle?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I had this exact same reaction the first time I ever heard about it.
All right. Continue.
And it was actually Isela the first time that I ever heard about Pappy Van Winkle. I was like, la verga, what the fuck is that? But no, you're going to have some respect for Pappy here after we're done with this story.
All right. He's no longer going to be your pappy. He's going to be your daddy. No, I'm just kidding.
All
right.
Pappy Van Winkle is considered the Cadillac of bourbons. It's highly sought after by collectors and bourbon aficionados for its great taste, legendary, mythical status, and rarity. While a bottle of its flagship 23-year bourbon retails for $250, they only make 84,000 bottles a year, so they commonly sell for over $4,000 on the secondary market. When 200 bottles go missing, people notice, and it makes international news. That's what happened in 2013 when the Great Pappy Van Winkle Bourbon Heist, or Pappygate, as it's often referred to, occurred.
Pappygate.
A Netflix documentary in 2021 introduced many people to this crime and its cast of colorful characters. A wider bourbon theft ring, police corruption, comically insecure whiskey distilleries, and steroid abuse. And they almost got away with it too, if it wasn't for an anonymous tip. But despite all the attention, some mistakes might have been made. Grab your Glencairns, give yourself a generous pour, and let's discuss the Great Pappy Van Winkle Bourbon Heist of 2013. Before we do, are you familiar with this story, Elena?
I can't say that I am. No.
Awesome. I know that you like true crime, so hopefully you enjoy it.
I also enjoy Netflix documentaries, so I'm surprised I haven't come across that one.
If you want to watch it, the documentary is called Heist, and it's the last 2 episodes called Bourbon King.
Oh, okay. So it's like part of a series of different heist stories, I guess. I guess.
I guess. I don't know. I haven't watched it.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
And it's weird because when I started writing this article, I actually thought this was going to be episode number 138. And I was super excited that we were going to be doing episode 138 together because I had been planning this for months. Then I realized it was only episode 136 and I had to pivot to another story.
Oh.
But I was thinking that maybe we can bring you on in a couple of weeks for episode 138 since it's a milestone episode.
Sounds good.
Cool. And if there's ever an episode that's going to get us sued or banned from YouTube, it's going to be episode number 138. So if you listen to us on YouTube and you notice that episode number 138 is missing, look for it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. All right, so enough about episode number 138. We're on episode number 136. Elena, do you want to take a guess at why Pappy Van Winkle bourbon, specifically their 23-year bourbon, is so rare?
Must be maybe like the barrels that they use to age it in. I don't know. Some kind of ingredient that they use that's kind of rare.
Well, you're kind of close with the barrels. Let me do a real quick bourbon lesson here. In order for an alcoholic beverage to be called a bourbon, by law, it has to meet the following criteria. And keep in mind, the criteria for whiskey is different. Not all whiskey is bourbon. The rules for whiskey in general are a bit looser. And this is by Nick Leghorn, not to be confused with Foghorn. I said Foghorn Leghorn, 31 Whiskey.
I was going to say the same thing. I was like, Foghorn Leghorn? I say it.
The mash bill or recipe has to be at least 51% corn. It has to be distilled at a maximum of 160 proof and be barreled at a maximum of 125 proof. This just means that you have to water it down to 125 proof or 62.5% alcohol before it goes into the barrel. And it can only be watered down with pure water. They must be aged in new charred oak barrels. Other whiskeys can reuse barrels, but for bourbon, it's one and done. Like the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, baby. One and done.
What a waste, though. Oh, I hope they recycle those barrels for the whiskeys.
Yeah, they do. I know that for Scotch, they do like to use old bourbon barrels.
Oh, okay.
And since they're already used, they kind of get them like at a discount.
Mm-hmm.
So they do use them a lot for Scotch.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Straight bourbon must be aged for a minimum of 2 years. If the label doesn't have an age statement, it must be aged for at least 4 years. By law, if you are to call yourself bourbon, you have to abide by this criteria. This is the legal definition of bourbon. It's pretty clear, right?
Yes.
So the thing that makes Pappy unique, especially their 20-year and 23-year bourbons, is that at the time they were bottled, they had no idea that their whiskey was going to become this popular or sought after. What was put in those barrels 23 years ago is all that there is. You can't go back in time 23 years and barrel more whiskey. You also have to account for evaporation. Every summer that whiskey is stored in a barrel, you lose some to evaporation. This is known in the industry as the angel's share. And just to give you an example, a 55-gallon barrel of Pappy that is aged 20 years will lose 50 gallons to evaporation.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So at the end of those 20 years, you're left with only 5 gallons of bourbon.
Wow. Yeah, those angels had some really good shares, man.
Hell yeah. I would want to be one of those angels at a Pappy distillery.
For real.
Also, as a bourbon distillery, you're losing almost 95% of your product, not to mention the cost associated with storing the barrels. So it's pretty much all a loss until the point that you bottle it and sell it. If something were to happen to the barrels, or if there was a contamination, or even if the bourbon just doesn't taste good, you just lost 23 years of time and money, and you have nothing to show for it.
Oh, that sucks, man.
So let me tell you what happened. In 1988, when they barreled some bourbon for Pappy 20-year, they had no idea that they were going to receive a score of 99 from the Beverage Testing Institute in 2008. That's almost a perfect score.
Mm-hmm.
When 2008 people saw this, that drove the demand for Pappy 20 through the roof, and Pappy 23 by association, because if 20 is good, 23 had to be better, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Pappy 15 year scored a 98 in 2004. Buffalo Trace Distillery, which makes Pappy Van Winkle by association, saw a huge boost in sales and scarcity of some of their other bourbons as well. And to this day, it's still very difficult to find a lot of their brands like Buffalo Trace, Weller's, and Eagle Rare. And I know because I've been looking for a few months for some of these just because I want to try them.
Wow.
Do you know if you've ever had any of those bourbons?
I'm pretty sure I have not. So not even like an exclusive bar here, do you think would have it? Or like a really expensive place here in the city?
It's possible. I mean, some of them like the Buffalo Trace, that's pretty much a $30 bourbon. Some of the Wellers are about $30. I think Eagle Rare is about $35 a bottle. So it's not that they're very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I think just the fact that they're a good price and they're made at the same distillery where they make Pappy Van Winkle. People are like, well, I know that I can't get Pappy Van Winkle because I don't have $4,000 to blow on a bottle.
Yeah.
But since it's made at the same distillery, maybe Buffalo Trace will get me there, Or a lot of times people call Weller's the poor man's Pappy because they kind of have the same mash bill, the same recipe.
Mm-hmm.
So people are like, well, I can't get Pappy's, so I'll get Weller's. And I think the one that's the same mash bill as a Pappy is like a $65 bottle. So that's like the great value Pappy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But again, it's impossible to find,
Crazy.
Yeah, it's super crazy how this is. The Buffalo Trace Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky is where our story takes place. Even though the bourbon thefts could be traced back to 2008, no one really noticed anything until 2013, when more than 200 bottles of Pappy Van Winkle were noticed to be missing. Aside from those missing 200 bottles, there was really no idea that anything more elaborate was going on. In February of 2015, Mark Rutledge, a manager at Intel, was at his gym talking with some buddies about impressing some friends and coworkers by taking them to a bar in Louisville, Kentucky that had Pappy for $100 a shot.
Oh, wow.
Imagine that, paying $100 for one shot.
I mean, what was I going to say? It sounds like a steal or a deal. You're still not paying $4,000 for a bottle and you can still taste it.
True, but keep in mind the retail price for a bottle of Pappy is $250.
Oh, okay. No, yeah. Well, I mean, you're always going to pay way more anyway.
Of course. But if you were to go to like your Total Wine or your Specs and they just so happen to have Pappy, you could get it for $250. That's how much they would sell it.
Right.
But of course, they sell out. Everybody, the moment they hear there's a drop, it's like the fucking like the sneaker drops where we're releasing like these Jordans or whatever. And everybody goes fucking crazy and buys them. And then they end up on eBay for like $10,000. It's the same thing with Pappy.
Like Stanley Cups?
Yeah. This is like the 2013 Stanley Cups.
Everybody get in line at your nearest Target.
That's super crazy too. I can't believe how crazy people are going for these things.
I know. I can't even with people right now.
So let's say that you were at a bar, and now that you know like how sought after, how rare Pappy is, if you had the opportunity to taste Pappy for $100, would you do it?
Yes.
I think so too. I think I would try to. Like that's more than what I would be willing to normally pay for a bottle of whiskey. Like I think I have a hard time paying more than like maybe like $50. I think 50 is like my upper limit. But if it's something that's that rare, like if I could find Pappy for $250 at like Costco or some shit, like I'm gonna pick that fucker up,
Yeah. I'll keep my eyes out. I'll keep a lookout.
Shit, I'll buy two, sell one for $4,000, and I'll keep the one for $250 and make myself a little profit.
Yeah, smart.
All right. So Mark Rutledge was going to be leaving for a conference in Texas, and he wanted to bring some Pappy along. One of the guys at the gym, Gilbert Toby Curtsinger, who worked at Buffalo Trace, told Rutledge that he could get him a bottle of Pappy 20-year for $1,000. And again, considering that this stuff sells for over $4,000 easily, $1,000 was a steal.
Mm-hmm.
Rutledge told them that he was interested in that and more if Curtsinger could acquire it. A week later, Curtsinger showed up with 9 bottles, which he let Rutledge have for $3,000. Imagine that, 9 bottles for $3,000.
How was he able to verify that they were like true Pappy bottles?
Because Curtsinger worked at Buffalo Trace, where they make them.
but he could have just slapped a label on another on another bottle and pretended.
Slap a bottle on like Evan Williams or some shit, like the $16 bottle.
Yeah. I mean, you never know.
True. And I guess if you are buying things from the secondary market, there is always a risk that you're going to get fall prey to something like that. But everything seemed to suggest that these 9 bottles were all legit.
Okay.
So on March 11th, Rutledge boarded his plane to Texas with most of the bottles. That same day, a detective in Frankfort, Kentucky, received an anonymous tip that whiskey was being stolen by the barrel from Wild Turkey. So just for context, Wild Turkey is their own company and they have nothing to do with Buffalo Trace. The detectives followed up on the tip and they showed up to a house. As soon as they got out of the car, they could smell the bourbon. They went out to a backyard shed and discovered 5 oak barrels covered in tarp. They lifted up the tarp and noticed that the barrels were spray painted to hide all identifying marks, the maker's mark, as they call them. The barrels turned out to be filled with premium bourbon distilled by Wild Turkey and had a combined value of $30,000.
Oh, wow.
Would you like to take a guess at who owned the house?
Probably the same guy that was selling the Pappy bottle to his buddy. No?
Correct. It was none other than our protagonist, our hero, Toby Curtsinger. So let's take a quick commercial break. And when we return, we'll talk about everything found at this house, including guns, steroids, erectile dysfunction drugs, and the little criminal empire that he was running.
Probably some cocaine too.
There was no cocaine that I could find.
Oh, man. Just kidding.
Girl, this has already got steroids and erectile dysfunction drugs. You want more, girl?
Just seems like it would have been part of the story.
That would have definitely made the story a little, just a tiny bit more interesting. But you're going to find that once we start going through some more of this story, especially some of the text messages that were discovered on this phone, this story gets really interesting really quick.
Nice.
Welcome to #History. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Leah. And if you're a history nerd,
or even a history hater,
this is the podcast for you.
Even if history was your least favorite subject in school, we can guarantee you will like this podcast because we talk about all the things that your history textbooks did not.
Things like how the Bonnie Prince Charles and his Jacobite uprising was a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, or how the pharaoh Akhenaten was so disliked by Egyptians that they literally purged his name from nearly all of their records and pretended like he had never existed.
And we do all of this while drinking and rating a custom-made cocktail specific to that week's topic.
So grab a drink, take a seat, and hang out with us each week as we learn all about history's greatest stories of controversy,
conspiracy,
and corruption.
Welcome to Scary Savannah and Beyond.
We're a podcast based in the Savannah, Georgia area.
Savannah is widely known as the most haunted city in America.
We bring you stories not just from Savannah, but from all over.
Thus, the Beyond.
We cover a myriad of topics on our show, including the paranormal, oddities, unsolved mysteries, true crime, and bi-weekly reports from our local police blotter.
We also do a weekly segment called What We're Watching.
And we'll also discuss the ongoing antics of our 2 furry canine friends on our segment, Layla and Coffee Talk.
So tune in every week on Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time to Scary Savannah and Beyond, everywhere podcasts are sold.
You know podcasts are free.
What do you mean free? I'm doing this for free? That's scary.
No, that's Scary Savannah and Beyond.
And we're back.
We're back.
Did you sell any Pappy Van Winkle on the black market during our break?
No, if I did, I probably would not be here right now. At $4,000 a bottle.
Be counting them Benjamins, right?
Right.
What about erectile dysfunction drugs?
No, I can't say that I did that either.
So what do you think about the story so far?
It's pretty interesting. No, just kidding. It's cool. I like it. I like that it involves booze. So it's one of my favorite subjects.
And it's funny that we both had episodes that were booze adjacent.
I know. I thought that too. I was like, wow. You like telepathically synced.
Yeah, when we took the picture for the socials, I was like, hold on, wait, I have a prop. And I brought up my little Glencairn. I had a little bit of early times bottled and bond in there. I think right now I'm drinking Larceny. I was like, I better switch to a lower proof bourbon here. And you were like, oh shit, I wonder if we're covering the same thing. I was like, I'll be super surprised if you know about this whole Pappy Van Winkle heist and shit.
Yeah, I know, because I held up my beer too, and I was like, we're both going to talk about booze.
Well, speaking of booze, before our break, we talked about the Popo showing up at Curtsinger's home and finding a treasure trove of illicit contraband.
And that sweet, sweet aroma.
Yes. They knew that there was bourbon there before they even got out of their car. They could smell that shit.
I know.
All right. So in addition to the 5 barrels of wild turkey, they found that Curtsinger had 11 handguns, 5 rifles, 3 shotguns, a silencer, half a dozen types of anabolic steroids, various drugs for erectile dysfunction, a bag full of hypodermic needles, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Oh my God, I was just going to say the same thing. Jesus. We are syncing telepathically.
I know. I wonder if we're like twins, like 5 years removed and shit, and we can like feel each other's pain or something.
I think so. Remember how I would tell you that I could like know what you were going to say before you even said it? For there was like a moment in time that we were just so synced up. It was so crazy.
I know, even our periods were synced up and everything.
Jeez, imagine that. It was all that ibuprofen you were taking.
I know. My testosterone was through the floor or something.
It was through the floor.
Well, it wasn't through the roof because it was lowered from all the ibuprofen. Yeah, I'm making this shit up on the spot. So
I know.
Maybe I should have hung up with Curtsinger and hooked up with various erectile dysfunction drugs.
I know. I'm wondering, was he selling that to people he knew needed it, or did he need it himself? Do we know this?
We do not know this.
Oh man. Yeah.
But I do. Well, we're gonna go into it a little bit. But apparently, one of the symptoms of steroids is that this does actually boost your estrogen.
Okay, yeah.
So a lot of times they do need to take testosterone, and they do need to take erectile dysfunction drugs, just because it's like, you've heard of Limp Biscuit?
Yes.
It's like Limp Dixkit.
Limp Disket.
Limp Dixkit.
Oh no. So
Yeah.
You're talking about something similar, or Viagra, right?
Yeah, Viagra is a form of erectile dysfunction drug. They didn't specify like what the brand names were.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that would be considered an erectile dysfunction drug.
The little blue pill. All right.
So Curtsinger told the cops that he had obtained the bourbon from a friend who worked at Wild Turkey.
And he was just holding it for him.
Yeah, he was just holding it for a friend, like as one does.
No big deal.
Yeah, I've got a couple of barrels of bourbon in my backyard too, just holding it for friends.
Yes, okay.
And as I say that, like the fucking SWAT comes in through the fucking windows and shit.
Hey, I know.
No, I'm just kidding.
They're going to come galloping down those hills.
NSA, that was totally a fucking joke. That was really a joke. Speaking of joke, though, when they asked Curtsinger to see his phone, he told them to ignore any text about selling Pappy. They were just meant as jokes.
Don't pay attention to those. They mean nothing.
Yeah, no, that's just jokes. And luckily, the police had a great sense of humor, and they were totally cool, as you would probably expect.
Sure. Sure, yeah.
So Curtsinger, his wife Julie, and 8 others were indicted on charges of operating a criminal syndicate that trafficked bourbon and anabolic steroids. And aside from having a great sense of humor, the police were great at the maths, as they called them the Curtsinger 9, even though there were 10 of them.
Okay. It just rings better, okay?
The Curtsinger 9, yeah, it does have a nice ring to it. I agree. So they were billed in the media as Bourbon Country's Ocean's 11. And because Curtsinger worked at Buffalo Trace, automatically people wondered and assumed that Curtsinger was behind the 200 Pappy bottles that went missing in 2013. But the barrels at Curtsinger's home were from Wild Turkey, and Wild Turkey didn't even realize anything was missing at this point. So this suggested that Curtsinger was running a bigger and more elaborate criminal operation.
And do we know how he got those barrels if he didn't work there?
We'll actually get into that in a couple of paragraphs.
Oh, it's a part of the 9/10?
Yeah, he was one of 10 in the Curtsinger 9.
Yeah.
So the police recovered $100,000 worth of whiskey from the Curtsinger home and began their investigation. They discovered that Curtsinger began stealing whiskey from Buffalo Trace in 2008. He started small by stealing bottles from display cases. He played in a softball team and started selling bottles to people that he would meet while playing. Most of the people he sold to didn't know that they were buying stolen bourbon. He would tell them that he was selling off excess inventory or whiskey that was unfit for bottling or whiskey that was going to be destroyed for tax purposes. And since he often made deliveries wearing his green Buffalo Trace shirt, it added some legitimacy to it. Now, there are some parts of the story that contradict that, because one source stated that customers would write on the checks that they were paying for softball lessons. Apparently, he sold one of his softball buddies $27,000 worth of Eagle Rare. So unless Babe Ruth came back from the grave to teach him baseball, I don't think any lessons would be worth $27,000.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. That is ridiculous.
Yeah. Once his business started picking up, he had to get inventive to steal the bourbon. So he would fill up plastic barrels with whiskey and mark them for destruction. Later, he would see that they were disposed of personally in the back of his truck. After a while, he would just pay off security guards to look the other way as he drove past security with barrels in his truck. The truck would have so many barrels that it would bottom out trying to drive up the driveway.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so imagine the shit, the tires slamming into the fenders from all the bourbon.
Yeah, no. I mean, I remember what were you doing? Oh, I was buying tile for the house and I went to Home Depot and they had to lift that shit onto the truck with one of those, I don't know what they're called.
A forklift?
Yeah, a forklift onto the truck. And I just remember that when they dropped it on there, like everything just felt like super heavy. And I was like, whoa. So I could just imagine what this felt like.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned forklift. When Curtsinger started getting more comfortable, he would just drive a forklift with a pallet full of bottles through the parking lot and across the fence to the adjacent parking lot and place the pallet on the back of his truck.
I know, manches.
I know, right? This guy had some big balls, especially for a man on steroids, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Business was so good for Curtsinger that he enlisted several friends to help expand his operation. He had people making sales in Lexington, others were selling in Georgetown, some were selling near the Tennessee border. One barrel ended up as a lawn ornament at the Cherry Blossom Golf Course. It was a Pappy barrel, which would have been worth more than $100,000 when full. While the supply at Buffalo Trace was kind of limited, one of the men in his operation, Sean Searcy, was a driver for Wild Turkey. His job was to take the barrels from the Wild Turkey distillery to a cluster of warehouses 30 miles away where they would be left to age. And once a barrel went to a warehouse, it was pretty much ignored for years. Curtsinger would simply text Searcy when he had an order, and Searcy would make a little detour to Curtsinger's stepdad's barn, roll them off the truck with an aluminum ladder, and go on his merry way.
Wow.
Each Wild Turkey barrel was sold for as much as $3,000. There were a couple of discrepancies here, though, as some sources said that the man's name was Mark Searcy, and others said that it was Sean Searcy. Also, some sources said that the barrels were taken to his father-in-law's house. Others said that it was the stepdad. Either way, it sounds like Curtsinger was running a tight operation here, right?
Right.
Did that answer your question as to where the barrels were obtained?
Of course. It sure did.
All right. There was also a bit of police corruption involved as well. During the investigation, it was discovered that a police officer from Frankfurt who used to play softball with Curtsinger would go into bulk purchases of steroids with other members of the crew. But you'll be happy to hear that when he was caught, he confessed that he was not selling it. It was for his own personal use. So that makes it okay, right?
Yes.
He also claimed that he had no idea the load of wild turkey he acquired was stolen. And a bottle of Pappy that he received as a donation for the fraternal police organization was stolen by another cop. So it's like he never even had it, right?
Right. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So since police officers famously protect each other and look the other way on their own crimes, it would come as no surprise that no charges were ever filed on this police officer. Ironically, this police officer was a department's DARE officer. And for those that might not remember from middle school, DARE stood for Drug Abuse Resistance Education. Remember those cute red ribbons they would give us?
I do remember. He was just trying to take drugs off the streets and take them himself so the kids wouldn't get to it.
You know what? You're probably right. I don't believe that he was using them on himself. He was just trying to get as many of these steroids off of the streets so that the kids wouldn't use them.
I think so. Mm-hmm.
A lot of the fun came in the text messages that were found on Curtsinger's phone. Apparently, everyone in his crew was really big into steroids, so a lot of times they would counsel each other. The names were omitted from the text threads, but in one of them, one of the guys was complaining that they were starting to lactate from all the steroids that they were taking.
Oh, no. Wait, so were all these guys like huge and buff? Do we have pictures? No. Do you have pictures?
I've only seen a picture of Curtsinger and Circe.
Uh-huh.
Circe just looks like a regular dude. Curtsinger looks like he could have been a wrestler in the 80s, back when they were kind of stocky.
Right.
But, I mean, you could tell that he was pretty strong. He looked kind of like Arn Anderson a little bit from the Four Horsemen and the Brainbusters.
Oh, no.
He kind of had like that receding hair a little bit.
Yeah.
He looked like he could have been like an 80s wrestler, I think.
Interesting.
All right, so we got one guy lactating here. Another guy told him to start taking estrogen blockers so that he could continue taking high doses of steroids with no side effects. That's really sweet, right? They were just looking out for each other.
Of course. They have tips.
Yeah, they have tips, yeah.
And tricks.
Yeah, and floozies. Actually, they do have floozies, but there's not a lot of information on that.
Oh, man.
One guy was even doing animal steroids, and I guess he got like an infection or something. So he was taking animal penicillin that he got from Tractor Supply Company.
What the heck is the difference? Like, what is animal steroids?
I don't know. I don't even know what animal penicillin is either. I just imagine it's like high quantity of penicillin or something. Maybe something you would give like to a horse or some shit.
Yeah. Okay. I don't even know why you would give steroids to animals, except for I know people take steroids when they have like a rash or something, or a cough to constrict the lungs. But
yeah, but those are not anabolic steroids, though. Those are different types of steroids.
But that's why I'm like wondering, like, what the heck? Why would you inject steroids into an animal?
The only thing I could think of is maybe racehorses.
Oh, to make them big.
And make them big and make them faster.
Yeah.
Make them big and strong, like me.
Yeah, I like Curtsinger.
Like Arn Anderson himself, Toby Curtsinger.
Oh, he had to take those steroids so he could be able to move those.
Those heavy ass barrels, right?
Yeah.
55 gallons, girl. It's a lot of weight.
Might as well.
But, you know, this guy got an infection, was taking animal penicillin. One of the other guys, though, was super sweet and offered to make him some chicken soup, which is adorable. Others were concerned if he had started barking or mooing or meowing as part of the side effects.
Oh, no.
But you know what? I do think that it's really great that everyone was there for each other and they were really just trying to help each other out. You don't really see that outside of TV or movies, or at least I don't. Like I stated, I couldn't find any information as to why they had so many erectile dysfunction drugs, but I'm guessing it was to counteract so much of the steroid use, especially if some of these fools were doing animal steroids.
Yeah, for real. Ugh.
Like I alluded to earlier, evidently there was a lot of infidelity, and there was always a fear that one of the jealous lovers was going to turn them in. But it appears like Circe running barrels to Curtsinger's stepdad or father-in-law's barn might have been the smoking gun. Apparently, Circe was on his way to deliver barrels to the barn in March when an unusually heavy snowstorm hit. Circe complained to a county employee that the dead-end country road where the barn was hadn't been plowed. This raised suspicions as to why a wild turkey truck needed to go down the road in the first place. It was just the dead-end country road.
Right.
That same morning, the Franklin County Sheriff's Department got an anonymous tip.
Anonymous in quotations.
Well, I want to say it was anonymous because there's two different sides as to what events led up to the anonymous tip. If you remember earlier, I was talking about the buddy Rutledge who wanted to buy the bottles of Pappy Van Winkle to show off while he was at some conference in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that same day that he got the bottles of Pappy was the day that they received the anonymous tip. And also the same day that Circe was trying to take those barrels into that barn is when they received the anonymous tip. So who knows really where this came from, those are just like two coincidences. So really it is anonymous. So that same morning, the Franklin County Sheriff's Department got an anonymous tip, which was a catalyst for the police officers to go there in the first place. And there was another discrepancy here, as some of the sources said that the wild turkey barrels were found at Curtsinger's house and not the barn. Just thought that I would point that out because it just kind of seems like the sources are kind of on track, but they give like different sides of it.
Right.
Now, although 10 people were implicated as part of the Curtsinger 9 for allegedly engaging in organized crime, Curtsinger was the only person that was sentenced to prison since he was believed to be the mastermind of the whole operation.
And I'm sure everybody else said, I'll take a plea deal and I'll tell you everything. Everything.
Well, there's one person that we know for sure did take a plea deal, and we'll talk about that person in a bit.
Okay.
But Curtsinger was sentenced to 15 years in jail, but was released after just 1 month on something known as shock probation, which can be given to first-time offenders who pose no threat to society. Have you ever heard about something like that happening?
I've never heard of it as shock probation.
But for somebody that was sentenced to 15 years in jail, being released after just 1 month?
Was it jail or prison?
It's the same shit.
It's not. Jail is where they hold you before you get sentenced to go to prison. But if the judge didn't see him as a threat, it doesn't surprise me.
All right. To me, that seemed very unusual. And since I had never heard of shock probation, that made it sound even more unusual to me.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I'm wondering, like what that means, what shock probation means.
And I guess since he was sentenced to prison, he was in prison and not jail.
Oh, it was prison. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they let him out on supposed good behavior, and also we need space for the real criminals who actually do pose a threat to society. This guy's not a harm. Although, I mean, he kind of was. He was giving people drugs or selling them or whatever.
True. He was also white, though, so I feel like white people don't get as harsh of prison sentences as people of color. So
true.
Now, we were talking about the Netflix documentary earlier, and again, full disclosure, I never watched it. But from what I understand, this story was presented as being an open and shut case, no notes. And personally, whenever I hear a documentary is made, I always think that there's some motivation behind it. Sometimes it's just for entertainment purposes. Other times, there's an agenda behind it. In this case, it appears like a lot of very important information was left out of the Netflix documentary. This is where I'm going to Midnight Shyamalan this shit.
Okay. Midnight or M. Night Shyamalan?
Well, I'm the Juarez Shyamalan, so I'm Midnight Shyamalan.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So in the Netflix documentary, Sheriff Melton presented the barrels that were taken from Curtsinger as proof that he was the mastermind behind the Pappy Van Winkle heist, but not one bottle of Pappy was recovered from Curtsinger's property. The barrels were all wild turkey. All the evidence that they had came from Curtsinger's phone, whether it was pictures of bottles he took that appeared to be from the front seat of his truck or call logs to his clients. And this was enough to convict him in the public's eye but it must be noted that no bottles of Pappy were ever recovered from Kurtzinger's property.
Because he probably sold them all.
It's possible, at least if we're going to believe Rutledge, the guy that purchased those 9 bottles, he sold at least 9 bottles of them.
Right.
At least. Aside from the pictures of a few bottles of Pappy's on Kurtzinger's phone, there was no evidence to tie him to the Pappy heist. In fact, it's believed that the true perpetrator of the heist was a man named Greg Anglin, who was totally unrelated to Toby Curtsinger. Greg Anglin even admitted that he stole as many as 15 cases or 180 bottles of Pappy from Buffalo Trace, but was given immunity for his testimony against Curtsinger.
Was he part of the 10? 9?
No, he was totally unrelated
You said unrelated. But he worked at the same place.
He worked at Buffalo Trace.
Okay. Weird.
Yes, but somehow they gave him like a plea deal that if he testified against Toby Curtsinger, they would pretty much give him immunity. Even though he did confess to stealing 180 bottles of Pappy. There were only 200 bottles missing, or that were noticed to be missing. He stole 180 of them.
Because they really wanted to get the other guy, even though they really didn't. He ended up getting a shock probation. All that work for nothing.
Right. Anglin even implicated another distillery employee, Susan Savard, who would have him build her pallets of select liquor and place them near her office door. And Savard would pay him $100 and a case of Pappy for making her these pallets. Savard would then cook the inventory numbers so they could take as much liquor as they wanted and nobody would be the wiser. Now, Curtsinger definitely was guilty of stealing large quantities of bourbon. He wasn't innocent by any stretch of the word. There's just no evidence of him stealing the 200 bottles of Pappy. All indications seem to suggest that Sheriff Melton had evidence that Curtsinger had stolen bourbon and blamed the Pappy heist on him. And again, there were 200 bottles missing, and Anglin admitted to taking 180 of them.
It was too much work to try and convict and research or whatever the other guy. I guess it's just easier. He had already started with this one. Might as well just finish it. I hate that.
I know. It's so stupid. Even like with all the fucking shit that they took from Curtsinger, it would not have equaled those 200 bottles or at least 180 bottles that Anglin had.
Yeah. But he was convicted for the Pappy heist and also the wild turkey stuff too. No, I imagine. Or they didn't care about that. Was that part of the conviction?
I think they were much more interested in the Pappy because it's so expensive. And I think that Sheriff Melton said, this fool Curtsinger's got a bunch of fucking stolen bourbon. And being that he works at Buffalo Trace, he must have stolen the Pappy. Which, again, Curtsinger definitely stole. I mean, remember, he would steal fucking pallets that would make his truck bottom out from how much liquor he had. But, I mean, really, the whole reason anybody was even investigating this was for the 200 bottles of Pappy. And it's very possible he had nothing to do with the 200 bottles being missing.
Right, yeah.
Or at least 180 of them because there was somebody that confessed to him and they were like, no, shut up. We're going to give you immunity. Just say that it was Curtsinger.
Okay.
But Susan Savard, she would tell me that it's like, shut up. Just say it was Curtsinger.
Jeez. Leading the witness. Aye. Well, I guess it was a good thing he got shock probation then because I don't want to say he didn't deserve it, but he didn't deserve the sentence for what they actually accused him of.
Exactly. And that's about all I have to say about that.
And that's all I got to say about that.
What do you think about this case, Elena?
You're right. With the whole, I do listen to a lot of true crime podcasts and documentaries. And it seems as though the biggest theme, I guess, in all of these documentaries that are unsolved or even solved is like a botched police investigation and them wanting to just hurry up their investigation and either A, not go through with it, or B, just have, what's it called? Like not blinders, but where you just have like the tunnel vision and just zero in on one person, even though that person is not the one that seems like they're the ones who did it. But, it just sounds good for it. So let's just go with that.
And I think that's a flaw that all of us as humans have. So we're kind of like dead set on something. It usually takes maybe like an exorbitant amount of evidence or convincing to make you see otherwise. Even if you're wrong, and people are telling you all the reasons that you're wrong, if you're dead set on something, it's very hard for you to change your mind. And I think with law enforcement, it's no different, even though I think some people kind of put them on a pedestal. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that they're just humans.
It's just us being stubborn.
Yeah. So I thought this was really interesting. Ever since I've been down this bourbon journey, and then with the whole whiskey club thing, I feel like it's called the Whiskey Subscription Club, but it's not a subscription and it's not a club.
But we do have a subscription club. It's called Patreon, and it's only $2 a month. That's only 66 cents a day, folks.
Watch. All right, so I guess you're like, all right, Jose, we're cutting you off here.
No, not at all.
No, but now that I've been doing that and I've been researching like what bottles I want to buy and everything. But again, I'm a nerd. Obviously, I'm a nerd. I have a fucking podcast. But I like to research it like, what's the story of this whiskey? Like what makes it unique? Where did it come from? Who came up with it?
What are the flavor notes that I'm getting?
My palate is not that developed yet where people are like, well, I can taste like a little bit of vanilla and I get a little bit of like apricot flavor in this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this one tastes less strong than the other one. I like this one more because it tastes more strong. It's more strong and more sweet and more smoky. Those are my flavor notes.
And then it has the smokies.
It has the smokies.
Oh, no. That's cool.
Yeah, that's fun. Speaking of smokies, special shout out to our super homies, super friends, Sophia, Natasha, Eric, and Angie.
Woo, 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 woo.
If you want to be super cool and help support the show, get the episodes a week early and ad-free, get your name shouted out on the show, and get some stickers from us a few times a year. Check us out at patreon.com/technicallyaconversation or check the show notes.
You just need to see what the next sticker is. It's going to be badass.
Well, you know what? I'm kind of redesigning it.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I'm coming out with something really cool. It's got, if you know the Ramones logo, it's kind of like the Ramones logo. So That's what I have in mind. But, of course, I'll show you and Isela first before making the order of them.
Schmaking
the orders. This is Sean Connery here to tell you about our Patreon. Best of all, it's only $2 a month, baby. You can't even buy cigarettes or a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle for that.
No, you can't.
Shit, you can't even buy a bottle of Evan Williams Black Label for that. And I should know because I'm Sean Connery and I was Bond. James Bond. That was such an awful impression. I should never do that again.
I enjoyed it.
All right, thank you. And on that high note, we hope that you enjoyed the show and you join us again next week. If you're enjoying the show, leave us a review, tell a friend, and subscribe wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Yeah.
Follow us on the socials at GreetingsTAC. Email us at greetingstac@gmail.com. Or leave us a voicemail at 915-317-6669. If you have a story about steroid-fueled lactating nipples,
oh my God,
to share with us.
Those should be very interesting. Please.
I don't know if you know this, but I've shared it with your husband, Antonio. Oh, I don't know why I said it that weird.
I was going to say, why did you say Antonio? I thought it was just a glitch in the Matrix.
It was a glitch in my brain. Leave us a voicemail at 915-317-69. All right, let me do it again. And honestly, this is the last time that I drink bourbon while I'm trying to record an episode. I fucked up so many times.
Yes, but it was so much fun.
Yes, definitely.
The jokes were great.
On next week's episode of Technically a Conversation.
Bob Marley was born in St. Parish on February 6, 1945. He was a palm reader. The weirder part is that one of his friends said that most of his predictions in some way came true. When he got older, he moved from St. Ann Parish to Trenchtown in Kingston, Jamaica. And this is actually where he started to dedicate his time to becoming a musician. And then in 1965, he recorded his first album. The group was called the Wailing Wailers, but they were a ska group. He somehow rode this fine line of singing political songs, religious songs without feeling preachy. Many of his songs were really uplifting. Bob said that he considered himself a messenger because he was so close to God. The backup singer said so many of them saw him as a clairvoyant or a prophet.
New episodes drop Monday. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a show.